Hey, are you still awake? Good. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up, dim the lights, and let your eyes rest. Tonight's story is a long one, so settle in because we have all the time in the world. It's the story of a mountain that once gave everything it had, and the people who learned, too late, what it means to want more than you need. Some say she still watches, even now. This is the legend of Maria Sinukuan. In the middle of the flat plains of Pampanga, there's a mountain that shouldn't be there. No other peak around it for miles, just endless rice fields. And then, rising almost 3,000 feet out of nowhere, the people called it Arayat. From a distance, it looked like any other mountain. Green, quiet, half hidden in clouds. But the people who lived at its feet knew better. They said the mountain breathed. They said that deep in its forests, the trees bore fruit unlike anything grown in the lowland fields. Guavas as big as a man's fist, pomegranates so heavy their branches bent to the earth, mangoes that ripened gold no matter the season. They said animals wandered freely there. Fowls, pigs, goats, more than any single family could ever need. It was not an ordinary mountain. It was enchanted, and an enchanted place, the old folks always warned, belongs to someone. Long before, the elders spoke of an even older spirit tied to this mountain. Erang Sinukuan, they called him, a being of fire and war, said to have taught the first people how to work metal, how to farm rice, how to survive. Some say the lady our story is about carried his name forward. Others say she was something entirely her own. Either way, everyone agreed on one thing. Mount Arayat belonged to her, and her name was Maria Sinukuan. They say she was beautiful, not in the way a flower is beautiful, brief and easily plucked, but in the way a mountain is beautiful, old, certain, impossible to fully see all at once. Her hair was black, naturally curled, falling all the way down to her ankles like a waterfall that never stopped moving. Her skin caught the light strangely, as though she were carved from the mountain's own stone, and then breathed into life. Few had ever seen her directly. Fewer still had spoken to her. But everyone, every single family living in the shadow of Mount Arayat, knew her kindness. Mariang Sinukuan did something no ordinary landlord ever did, no datu, no rich man in any of the neighboring towns ever did. She gave, every night, families who had little, a widow with too many mouths to feed, a farmer whose crop had failed that season, a fisherman whose nets had come back empty, would wake at dawn to find something waiting at their doorstep, a basket of fruit, so ripe it seemed to glow, a fowl plucked and ready for the pot. Sometimes, if the family's need was great, a whole young pig tied gently with vine, waiting patiently by the door. No one ever saw her leave these gifts. No one ever heard footsteps in the night, but everyone knew whose hands had placed them there. Let me tell you about one such family. There was a widow named Perla, who lived at the edge of the village nearest the mountain, with 3 young children and no husband to help her. The year the rains came late, her small plot of land gave her almost nothing. She lay awake many nights, listening to her children's stomachs growl, wondering how she would feed them through the dry season. Then, one morning, she opened her door to sweep the step and found 3 fat guavas, a woven basket of rice, and a young hen resting calmly beside her doorframe. She fell to her knees right there on the dirt path and wept. She did not need to ask who had done this. She simply looked up toward the green shoulders of Mount Arayat pressed her palms together and whispered her thanks to the wind. Perla was not the only one. There was old Mancardo, a farmer whose water buffalo had died in the fields, leaving him with no way to plow. One morning, he found a young, healthy carabao calf tethered outside his hut, already strong enough to begin training. There was a young couple, newly married, who found on their doorstep enough grain and livestock to start their first harvest season without fear. Story after story, doorstep after doorstep, the pattern repeated across the villages that ringed the base of the mountain. And with every gift, the people's love for Maria Sinukuan grew deeper. They built no temples for her. She asked for none. Instead, they honored her the only way she seemed to want, by leaving her mountain untouched. No hunter set traps on her slopes. No farmer cleared her forests for new fields. The mountain was hers, whole and undisturbed, and in return, she made sure that no family at its feet ever went hungry. For a long, long time, this arrangement held. It seemed, to everyone living then, that it might hold forever. But you know, don't you, how these stories tend to go? Years passed. Children who had grown up hearing of Maria Sinukuan's kindness became parents themselves, and to a generation that had never truly known hunger, that had always found a gift waiting at the door, the gifts began to feel less like a blessing and more like something owed. It started small. A family that received one basket of fruit began to wonder quietly why it couldn't be two. A household with a healthy hen at their door began to whisper about how much better it would be with a whole flock. The old people, the ones like Perla, now gray-haired, who remembered what true hunger felt like, tried to warn the younger ones. One day, a group of young men decided they had waited long enough for gifts left quietly at doorsteps. They would go and see the source for themselves. They set out before sunrise, sacks slung over their shoulders, laughing nervously among themselves as they crossed into the tree line that no one from their village had crossed in living memory. Maria Sinukuan. Her black hair moved like water down to her ankles. Her presence seemed to bend the light around her. The young men, so bold on the walk up, found they could not speak a single word. It was she who spoke first, her voice calm, almost amused. "Welcome to my home, young men," she said. "You have walked far. Take what you need. My mountain provides for those who come with an honest heart." As they turned to begin their descent, something changed. Their sacks, already impossibly heavy, seemed to grow heavier still with every step. The straps dug into their shoulders. Their legs trembled. The path that had seemed so short on the way up now stretched endlessly before them. They didn't understand it yet, not fully, but the mountain itself seemed to be weighing their greed and finding it wanting. And then, once more, she appeared before them. This time, her expression was nothing like the warmth of that morning. Her eyes had darkened. The light around her no longer felt golden, but sharp, like the edge of a blade caught in the sun. "I welcomed you," she said, her voice no longer gentle, "and told you to take what you needed. Look at what you carry. Tell me, was any of this need? Or was it only want, dressed up to look like need?" The young men had no answer. Their silence was answer enough. "Because of your greediness," Maria Sinukuan said, raising her hand, "I am going to turn you all into swine." With a single wave, it was done. Where 7 young men had stood moments before, there were now 7 pigs, squealing in confusion and fear, their overstuffed sacks scattered and split open around them, fruit rolling down the mountainside into the dirt. None of them returned to their village again, and so, at last, Maria Sinukuan did the only thing left to protect what remained of her mountain. She stopped leaving gifts at the doorsteps. No more baskets of fruit at dawn. No more hens tied gently by the door. No more calves waiting patiently in the morning mist. The fruit trees on the mountain, once so heavy they bent to the ground, slowly bore less and less. The animals that had once wandered freely grew scarce, retreating deeper into forests that no longer welcomed visitors. And Maria Sinukuan herself was never seen again. She did not destroy the mountain. She did not curse the villages or take back what she had already given. She simply withdrew. She had given everything, freely, for as long as her gifts were received with gratitude. But the moment gratitude curdled into entitlement, she chose silence instead. The people of the villages had to learn, slowly and painfully, to farm their own fields again, to raise their own animals, to work for what they needed, rather than wait for it to appear at their door. It was harder, it was slower, but it was, in its own way, the beginning of their healing, a return to something more honest than the gifts had ever been. Mount Arayat still stands today. In the province of Pampanga, its peak often wrapped in cloud, watching over the plains around it. The people who live near it still speak of Maria Sinukuan, some with reverence, some with a kind of wary respect, the way you might speak of a relative who was generous once, but whom you learned never to take for granted. Hikers who climb the mountain today still tell of strange, unexplainable feelings along certain trails, of fruit that seems, just for a moment, unusually large before it's gone from sight the next time they look, of a sense of being watched in the deeper parts of the forest, not with malice, but with quiet judgment. Whether you believe it or not, the story has outlived every person who first told it, which is perhaps the only kind of immortality a legend truly needs. Before we close tonight, I want to share something with you. Not every version of this legend ends the same way I've told it tonight. In some tellings, Maria Sinukuan is not alone at all, but one of 3 sisters, the Tres Marias, they're sometimes called, alongside Maria Makiling, guardian of Mount Makiling in Laguna, and Maria Cacao of Mount Lantoy in Cebu. Some say all 3 were daughters of an older, mightier spirit, each carrying forward a piece of his legacy across 3 different mountains. So the next time someone tells you a gift is owed to you, remember the young men who climbed Mount Arayat with empty sacks and came down not at all. Remember that even the most generous hand can close when it is met again and again with want instead of gratitude.
If you're a 90s kid and you remember this legend, comment hidden gem below. And if there's another legend you'd like to hear, just let me know so that I can feature on my next episode.